The rain didn't just fall that evening. It hammered against the cracked pavement of downtown Seattle like a gavel striking a sounding block, a cruel and relentless foreshadowing of the judgment awaiting Arthur the next morning. He stood on the corner of 4th and Main, clutching a cheap black umbrella, his only shield against a world that seemed determined to drown him. He wasn't just protecting a suit he'd bought from a thrift store specifically for tomorrow. He was protecting his dignity, his last shred of hope, and ultimately, his right to be a father to his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. The wind howled through the concrete canyons of the city, biting through the thin fabric of his jacket, but the cold he felt on his skin was nothing compared to the chill freezing his heart. Arthur was a man who had done everything right, or at least he had tried, but life had a way of keeping score that felt rigged against the poor. His hands, calloused from years of carpentry and odd jobs, gripped the plastic handle of the umbrella so tight his knuckles turned white, the anxiety of the upcoming custody hearing manifesting in every tense muscle of his body. Before we continue this story of sacrifice and unexpected turns, I have a small favor to ask. If you believe that kindness still exists in this world and that everyone deserves a second chance regardless of their bank account, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs hope today. Your support helps us share more touching stories like Arthur's. Arthur checked his watch, the glass face scratched but still ticking, much like himself. He was waiting for the number 12 bus, the long route that would take him back to the small, one-bedroom apartment he shared with Lily. He was tired, bone-weary in a way that sleep couldn't fix, but he couldn't afford to miss the bus. Missing the bus meant being late to pick up Lily from the neighbor who watched her, which meant paying extra, which meant skipping dinner. That was the math of his life, a constant subtraction of needs until only the absolute essentials remained. As he huddled against the brick wall of a closed bakery, trying to stay out of the wind, he noticed a woman standing a few feet away near the curb. She was dressed in a sharp, gray skirt suit that whispered money, but right now, she looked utterly defeated. She had no umbrella, no coat, just a leather briefcase held over her head in a futile attempt to shield her hair from the deluge. She was shivering violently, frantically looking down the street for a taxi that wasn't coming. In this weather, in this part of town at rush hour, finding a cab was harder than finding gold. Arthur watched her for a moment. He saw the way the rain was ruining her expensive clothes, but more than that, he saw the look in her eyes. It was a look of overwhelming stress, of a bad day turning into a catastrophe. It was a look he saw in the mirror every single morning. He knew he shouldn't move. He knew he needed to stay dry for court tomorrow. Appearance mattered. His lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Mr. Henderson, who seemed more interested in his lunch than the case, had told him specifically, "Look stable, Arthur. Look like you have it together." A soaking wet, shivering man did not look stable, but Arthur was cursed with a heart that was softer than his circumstances. He looked at the dry patch of concrete under his feet, then at the woman who was now hugging herself, teeth chattering audible over the traffic noise. He thought of Lily. He thought of what he would want a stranger to do if Lily were ever grown up, alone, and stuck in a storm. Without letting himself think about the cold consequences, Arthur stepped away from the wall. He walked over to the woman, the rain immediately assaulting his trousers. "Ma'am?" he called out over the roar of a passing truck. She jumped, startled, her eyes wide and defensive. She saw a large man in a slightly ill-fitting suit, and he could see the instinctive fear flash across her face. He stepped back to give her space, holding the umbrella out toward her handle first. "You're going to catch your death out here," Arthur said, his voice rough but gentle. "Please, take this." The woman stared at the umbrella, then at him. I can't take yours," she stammered, her voice shaking from the cold. "You'll be soaked." Arthur offered a tired, genuine smile. "I'm made of tough stuff. Besides, I've got a bus coming any minute. You look like you're waiting for a miracle. Maybe this is just a small one." He pressed the handle into her hand. She hesitated, her fingers brushing against his rough, calloused palm, and then she took it. The relief on her face was instantaneous. "Thank you," she breathed, stepping under the black canopy. "You have no idea. This day has been—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm Evelyn. I don't have any cash on me to pay you for this." Arthur waved a hand dismissively, already feeling the icy water soaking through his shirt, plastering it to his back. I don't want your money, Evelyn. Just pay it forward sometime. My name is Arthur. Get home safe. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and jogged down the block to where he saw the bus lights approaching, pulling his jacket collar up in a useless attempt to stay dry. He spent the 40-minute bus ride shivering uncontrollably, a puddle forming around his worn-out dress shoes, earning glares from other passengers. But as he sat there freezing, he didn't regret it. For one moment, he had been able to help someone. In a life where he felt helpless, that small act of agency was worth the cold. By the time Arthur got home, he was coughing. The apartment was cold. He kept the heat low to save on bills. Lily was already asleep on the pull-out couch that served as her bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Arthur stood over her for a long time, water dripping from his nose onto the carpet, his heart swelling with a painful, fierce love. She was everything. She was the reason he worked double shifts, the reason he endured the humiliation of asking for extensions on rent, the reason he was fighting his ex-wife, Sarah. Sarah, who had left them 2 years ago for a man with a sports car and a volatile temper, now wanted full custody. She argued that Arthur was destitute, that he couldn't provide the life a child needed, and on paper, she was right. Arthur peeled off his wet clothes, hanging the suit carefully over the radiator, praying the wrinkles would fall out and the fabric wouldn't warp. He barely slept that night, his body alternating between feverish heat and chills, his mind playing out the worst-case scenarios of the courtroom on a loop. The next morning, the sun was shining, a cruel irony after the storm. Arthur felt terrible. His head pounded, his throat felt like it was filled with broken glass, and his suit, though dry, smelled faintly of damp wool and desperation. He ironed it as best he could, dressed Lily in her best Sunday dress, and dropped her off at school with a hug that lasted too long. "Daddy loves you, lil' bit," he whispered into her hair. "I'll see you tonight." He had to believe that. He had to. He arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, his stomach churning with nausea. The building was imposing, all marble and mahogany, designed to make small men feel smaller. He met Mr. Henderson in the hallway. The lawyer looked at Arthur's red eyes and pale face and sighed. "You look like hell, Arthur. I told you appearance matters." Arthur just nodded, too hoarse to explain about the rain or the umbrella. "I'm ready," he rasped. "I just want to tell the truth." They entered the courtroom. It was a sterile, intimidating space. Sarah was there, sitting next to her high-priced attorney, looking radiant and confident. She didn't even look at Arthur. She looked at the judge's empty chair, expecting victory. The bailiff called out, "All rise," and the heavy oak door behind the bench opened. Arthur stood up, his legs trembling slightly. He kept his eyes on the floor, respectful and terrified. It wasn't until the judge sat down and the bailiff announced, "The Honorable Judge Evelyn Vance presiding," that Arthur looked up. The air left his lungs in a silent whoosh. It was her, the woman from the street, the woman he had given his umbrella to. Judge Evelyn Vance sat high on the bench, wearing black robes that swallowed her figure, her face stern and composed. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, no sign of the wet, bedraggled woman from the night before. Arthur's heart stopped. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his chest. Did she recognize him? If she did, would she think he had done it on purpose? Would she think he was trying to curry favor, to bribe a judge with a cheap umbrella? That was a crime. He could lose Lily instantly. Or worse, would she not remember him at all? To her, he was just a random man in the rain. To him, she was the arbiter of his entire existence. He watched her scan the room. Her eyes moved over the lawyers, over Sarah, and then landed on Arthur. For a split second, her gaze paused. There was a flicker, confusion, then recognition, then a mask of absolute professional neutrality slammed down. She looked away, shuffling the papers in front of her. Arthur felt like he was going to vomit. He sank into his chair, wishing he could disappear. The hearing began, and it was a bloodbath. Sarah's lawyer was ruthless. He painted Arthur not as a loving father, but as a failure. He brought up the late utility bills from last winter. He brought up the fact that Arthur didn't have a car and had to take the bus. He brought up the small size of the apartment. "Your Honor," the lawyer smoothed his silk tie, "Mr. Miller is a good man, perhaps, but he is financially unstable. He cannot provide the security, the enrichment, or the resources that a growing child needs." My client can offer a private school, a safe neighborhood, and a stable home environment. Poverty is not a crime, but in this case, it is a barrier to the child's welfare. Arthur sat there, taking the blows. Every word was true, and every word was a lie. They were facts without context. They didn't capture the nights he stayed up helping Lily with math, the way they made fortresses out of cardboard boxes, the laughter that filled their small home. When it was Arthur's turn to speak, he stood up slowly. His fever was spiking. He was swaying slightly on his feet. He gripped the podium to steady himself. He didn't look at Sarah. He looked directly at Judge Vance. "Your Honor," his voice cracked, rough with sickness. "I can't deny what the gentleman said. I don't have much money. I drive nails for a living. I take the bus. Sometimes we eat pasta for a week straight." He took a shaky breath. "But Lily isn't a line item on a budget. She's my daughter. I was there when she took her first step. I held her when she had the flu, and her mother was away. I teach her to be kind. I teach her that doing the right thing matters more than what you have in your pocket." He paused, his eyes watering. "I may not be able to give her a pony or a big house, but I give her everything I am. I give her my shelter. I would stand in the rain until I froze if it meant she stayed dry. Please, don't take her away because I'm poor. Take her away only if you think I don't love her enough. And I promise you, that's impossible." Arthur sat down, exhausted. The silence in the courtroom was heavy. Sarah looked bored. Mr. Henderson looked surprised by Arthur's eloquence. Judge Vance sat motionless for a long moment, her face unreadable. She looked at the file in front of her, then at Sarah, and finally at Arthur. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "This case," she began, her voice authoritative and clear, contrasting with the shivering woman Arthur had met, "is difficult. We have a mother with means and a father with history." She looked at Sarah. "Mrs. Miller, you offer financial stability. That is important." Sarah smiled smugly. Then the judge turned to Arthur. "Mr. Miller, you admit to your struggles. However," Judge Vance continued, leaning forward, "character is not something that can be quantified in a bank statement. This court's primary concern is the best interest of the child. And the best interest of a child is often determined by the moral fiber of the parent raising them." She paused, her eyes locking onto Arthur's. "Yesterday evening, I was caught in the storm. I was stranded, helpless, and quite frankly, scared. A man stopped. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know I could help him or hurt him. He saw a human being in distress, and he gave me his only protection, walking away into the rain without asking for a dime." The courtroom went deadly silent. Sarah's lawyer frowned, confused. Arthur held his breath. "That man," Judge Vance said, her voice softening just a fraction, "was the defendant, Mr. Miller. Now I cannot let a personal interaction dictate the law. However, it offered me a glimpse into the character of the man standing before me. A man who protects strangers at his own expense is a man who will protect his daughter with his life. That is the kind of stability that money cannot buy. It is the stability of the heart." She picked up her gavel. "Mr. Miller has been the primary caregiver for 3 years. The child is happy, healthy, and by all accounts, deeply loved. I see no reason to disrupt her life based on tax brackets. Full physical custody is granted to the father, Arthur Miller, with generous visitation rights for the mother, provided she pays the calculated child support to assist in raising the child she claims to care so much about." The gavel banged down. The sound was the sweetest thing Arthur had ever heard. It echoed through the room, shattering the tension. Sarah gasped, "Her." Lawyer slamming his pen on the table. Arthur didn't move. He couldn't. He put his head in his hands and wept. He wept for the stress, for the fear, and for the overwhelming relief washing over him. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Mr. Henderson, actually smiling. "Good job, Arthur. Good job." As the courtroom cleared, Arthur stood up, wiping his eyes. He looked toward the bench, but the judge was already gathering her files. Before she disappeared into her chambers, she paused and looked back. She didn't smile, not professionally, but she gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Then she tapped the side of her desk where a black, cheap umbrella was resting, dry and safe. Arthur walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. The sickness in his body felt like a distant memory, replaced by the adrenaline of victory. He was going to pick up Lily. He was going to take her for ice cream, even if it meant skipping lunch himself. He realized then that the umbrella hadn't just kept a lady dry, it had saved his world. It was a testament to the fact that goodness, no matter how small, always returns. We are coming to the end of Arthur's journey, but before I share the final touching moment, I have a question for you. If you had one umbrella and saw a stranger suffering in the storm, would you give it up? Please, write "I would" in the comments if you believe in the power of sacrifice. Arthur arrived at the school gates just as the bell rang. He watched the tide of children flow out, a sea of backpacks and laughter, and then he saw her, Lily, with her pigtails bouncing, searching the crowd for him. When she saw him, her face lit up with a joy that was brighter than the sun. She ran to him, and he dropped to his knees, ignoring the ruin it would cause his suit pants. She slammed into him, small arms wrapping around his neck. "Daddy, you're here!" she squealed. Arthur held her tight, burying his face in her small shoulder, breathing in the scent of crayons and childhood. "I'm here, baby," he whispered, tears leaking from his eyes again. "I'm always here, and I'm not going anywhere." He stood up, lifting her effortlessly into his arms, carrying his whole world as he walked toward the bus stop. He didn't have his umbrella anymore, but looking at his daughter's smile, he knew he would never need it again. He had already weathered the storm,